Steve Dickinson is back with us today. Steve is a co-author of a recent book on the unofficial Everton timeline, 2014 to 2023, the Moshiri years, which is a great read on everything that's gone on at Everton under the ownership of Farhad Moshiri. And Steve, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Paul. Great to be back on the show.
But of course, it's a very sad day for Evertonians because we learned this morning, Steve, about the very sad news about the death of the former Everton striker, Kevin Campbell, who's died at the age of 54. This is just incredibly sad news.
It is. Kevin is adored by Evertonians, and not only for his footballing prowess, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but he's just a great human being and always great to be around. It's so sad and such a loss at such an early age.
It is indeed. And, you know, he scored 50 goals in 160 appearances for Everton. And, you know, we'll talk about his career in a moment. He had spells, of course, beginning at Arsenal. 1999, he arrived at Everton. We'll talk about that as well. 8 clubs in total. Everton Football Club today issued a statement in which they said that everybody at Everton is deeply saddened by the death of Kevin Campbell. Not just a true Goodison Park hero, an icon of the English game, but an incredible person as well. As anyone who ever met him will know, R.I.P. Super Kev. And I think that is the point, isn't it, Steve? Because, yes, there is a lot of love for Kevin Campbell from Evertonians, but also from the footballing community all over the world.
Yeah, I think he just spread sunshine into every place he went. He had a great start to his career at Arsenal, went off to Forest, and then played in Turkey for a while with Trabzonspor, and came to us on loan in March '99, and but you know, he had a great career. But he's often remembered for his appearances out in the Goodison Road, out with the fans, and they just mobbed him. You know, they just thought he was a fantastic guy, and he was.
Absolutely. And, you know, you talk about his career. We know he began at Arsenal, of course. He then went on to Forest, where he scored 22 goals in 39 games in his final season there to help the club win promotion to the Premier League. As you say, he played for a while in Turkey. That was not a particularly happy time for Kevin Campbell, was it? Because there was issues, there was racism. Arguably, it was a low point in his career. But then he arrived at Goodison Park in 1999. And many people have spoken about the fact that with 8 games of the season to go, he scored 9 goals. And really those goals helped Everton to avoid relegation that year.
They did. I mean, I remember that season well. We were under Walter Smith, who's the manager at the time. And it wasn't a great start to the season. I just reflected my memory on the Everton results website. And we were in 18th place after the second game, a loss away at Leicester. And really were hovering around the relegation zone throughout the season. And then Kev came in on loan, as you say, in March. And in March we had a terrible run of results, consecutive defeats away, at home against Arsenal, away against Man United and Liverpool, and home again against Sheffield Wednesday. But I'm happy and proud to be able to say that I think I saw all of his goals scored in that season. I saw the games at home against Coventry when he scored both goals and we won 2-0. I remember particularly being away at Newcastle United at St James's Park, and we started the game just hovering above the relegation spot. And, you know, it was a tough place to go at that time. And Kevin scored 2. Scott Gemmell scored the other one, and we won 3-1. And then the following game again was back home against Charlton. He scored 2 goals in a 4-1 win. And then there was a fabulous hat-trick of his in the last home game of the season where we beat West Ham 6-0. And by that time we were in 14th place and cruising. So, you know, his 9 goals in 8 games, as you say, just came at a vital time. He really stepped up to the mark when we needed him.
Yeah, happy memory, Steve. And then, of course, you've got the memory of the 1-0 win for Everton in the Merseyside derby at Anfield in September of 1999. And let's be honest, Everton don't particularly tend to do that well when they go to Anfield. But, to win the Merseyside derby with that goal in a 1-0 win, again, one of the highlights of Kevin Campbell's career.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't get a ticket for that game at Anfield, but I watched it on Sky. In the days when there weren't as many games on Sky, but that game, it was a Monday night game, and we appeared on Sky TV, and he scored that goal until the 2-0 win during COVID. He was the last Evertonian to score a winner at Anfield. Happy days.
And of course, you talk about Kevin Campbell arriving with Walter Smith as the manager. He stayed at Goodison Park for 5 years. David Moyes, by that time, was the manager of Everton. And in his time, he scored 45 Premier League goals. And Kevin Campbell remains Everton's 5th highest Premier League goal scorer of all time. And as I said before, 50-odd goals in 160 appearances in all competitions for the club. We remember the goals, of course, but as you say, we remember the man, and a very special man as well.
Yeah, and also... in slightly different era, he was Everton's first black captain and a tremendous leader on and off the field. Obviously never shared a dressing room with him, but all of the stories from Alan Stubbs and people who knew him players who knew him, just said he lit up the dressing room. He was such a positive influence in the time, and a great Everton number 9.
And we should also mention as well that he played a really important role in the development of Wayne Rooney when Wayne Rooney came to Goodison Park as a 16-year-old. And Kevin Campbell was that experienced elder statesman, if you want to call it that, who could give his experience to Wayne Rooney. And also he did a similar role as well with Francis Jeffers as well, to give the younger players some advice and guidance when they arrived at Everton.
Yes. He, as we said, the tributes have been pouring in from thousands of people all around the footballing world, lots of Evertonians, lots of other people as well, and that seems to be just the common theme, that he was so loved wherever he went. It's so sad, but his life will be remembered for the happiness he brought to those he played with and to those who supported him.
And I also know as well, Steve, he was very proud of his son, Tyrese, who has played for Stoke City in recent seasons. So the Campbell footballing tradition continues in the family with his son, as I say, playing for Stoke City. But away from football as well, he also formed a record label called Too Wicked in the later stages of his time at Everton. But he did a lot of good as well after he finished playing football in terms of charity work, because he would visit refugees in Iraq and Africa, and also carry out a lot of humanitarian work as well. So he was a player that clearly enjoyed his game on the pitch, but he did a lot of good outside the footballing world as well.
Yeah, he was a tremendous pundit and always spoke his mind as well. Obviously, great charitable work. I remember in the latter days of Sam Allardyce's time at Everton as manager of Everton, Kevin, in his way, not sticking the boot in, but he made it very clear on Sky TV when he was interviewed there that he felt that Everton fans were never going to take to Sam Allardyce, and it was time for a shake-up, time for Farhad Moshiri to roll the dice and to change things around. So yeah, a lovely man, but not afraid of speaking his mind when he felt he had a point to make.
And I'm talking to Steve Dickinson. Steve Dickinson is a co-author on a new book all about the unofficial Everton timeline under Farhad Moshiri, 2014 to 2023, the Moshiri years. And Steve, we've spoken on the show a few times now about your book and about life at Everton under the Moshiri years. It is a great read, and it's still available for listeners to buy, I believe, on Amazon, but it's also available now in other formats as well, I believe.
Yeah, it's available in paperback and Kindle format, and the audiobook version is in production and we'll have news on the release date for the audiobook in the very near future.
Which is good news, and clearly the book is about Everton under Moshiri, and we now know that Moshiri wants to sell his stake in the club. The latest development to this, of course, is the news that the Friedkin Group has agreed a deal in principle to complete the takeover of Everton. The chairman, Dan Friedkin, who also owns Roma, is now believed to be a strong favourite to purchase the club. Now, this news, of course, Steve, comes just a matter of weeks since the proposed deal with 777 fell through. What's your reaction to this latest development?
Cautious optimism. I think after the dark times and the prospects of being owned by an organisation such as 777, it's good to see the back of that possibility, but then all Evertonians are looking with caution as to who emerges from the shadows as potential new owners. And there have been a slew of 5 or 6 expressions of interest in the media about buying Everton over the last week. And Dan Friedkin, the Roma owner, as you say, was one of the pack of people who were expressing interest over the last week or 10 days. But it does appear that as news yesterday in most of the major media, including the New York Times, which was picked up by Paddy Boylan and Matt Slater in The Athletic, that Friedkin has now reached agreement in principle for exclusivity for his offer to get so Moshiri will grant him exclusivity hopefully over the weekend, and then we'll begin the process then of finalising the negotiations, and most importantly getting the owners and directors test passed for the Premier League.
And as you say, Steve, I think it is right to be cautious at this point, because a decision about whether Friedkin wants to exercise the option of buying Moshiri's shares could come by the weekend, but we've not had that official confirmation as yet. What we do know, however, is the chairman, Dan Friedkin, has a reported net worth of 4.8 billion. And it is interesting, isn't it, to see what he's done at Roma, because he bought the club in 2020. He appointed Jose Mourinho as manager the following year, and with some success, because subsequently in 2022, Roma won the Europa Conference League, and then a year later, they got to the final of the Europa League. So there is clearly recent evidence, Steve, that, the Friedkin Group can bring success to a club. I mean, we shouldn't learn to walk before we can run, or run before we can walk, shall I say. But, when you look at what Roma have achieved since he bought the club, it does look positive.
It does indeed, and being able to attract someone like Jose Mourinho to the club, even though Mourinho's now moved on, but that says a lot. And the results on the field have been good, and as you say, they progressed well in European competitions. But what really impresses me about Dan Friedkin and his group is what they've done on the commercial side of Roma. If you look at their sponsorship partners now, and remembering that Friedkin and his family have made most of their money over 50 years or so, as being the principal dealer for Toyota cars in the US. And, they don't have just one or two, they have hundreds of dealerships. But they have a very strong and deep relationship with Toyota as an organization. And it's probably no surprise then that Toyota are the training kit sponsor for Roma at the moment. And interestingly as well, recently Roma have attracted Adidas as their kit supplier. And these are heavyweight sponsors to have behind you in commercial terms. Mm. So I think that the sponsorship side, if the deal is right, and of course we don't know from the initial reports what the financial deal will be. We probably won't know until after the negotiations are concluded, and depending on how things emerge in the media. But if the deal is right, if the deal helps reduce Everton's debt, if it helps raise the cash or inject the cash into the club to complete the stadium, where I think still about 75 million is still necessary for payments to Lang O'Rourke between now and the year end to complete the stadium. To complete the stadium, pay down the debts, inject some cash into the rebuild of the squad. Oh, and by the way, if they can make sure that Jared Branthwaite stays with the club, that will be just hunky-dory as well. But as I say, for me, it's the commercial side that I think he brings. And although, as you pointed out, we shouldn't run before we can walk, but if it does transpire that he becomes Everton's new owner, then it will be interesting to see if they can also repeat what they did in other venues in their partnership with Toyota. Bearing in mind we've got this beautiful new, as yet unnamed stadium on the banks of the Mersey.
Yeah, this is it. And, since 777 got involved with the club, I think it's fair to say there's been quite a bit of concern and also negativity from Evertonians about the involvement of 777. But this news clearly appears to be more positive. A lot of Evertonians wanting this potentially to go ahead. But as you say, should the Friedkin Group do their due diligence and decide that they want to move forward with this, the next situation, I believe, Steve, is that Everton would still need to get approval from the Premier League, the Football Association, and also the Financial Conduct Authority as well.
Yes, and let's hope that could be a far speedier process. We have to remember the 9 months or so that 777 unsuccessfully took to get those approvals was largely because they just didn't have the money. They had the interest and the desire to buy Everton, but they just couldn't come up with the accounts, with the money to prove that they actually had the wherewithal to go ahead with the deal. And I don't imagine for a moment that will be the case with Friedkin. He will come in, as you pointed out at the start of the chat, current net assets of £4.8 billion. The money that he needs to invest in Everton is not small change, but nevertheless it sounds like he is going to come in and be able to demonstrate his source of funding. And if he has a plan, and he sounds like a man who will have a plan and certainly has executed a plan well at Roma since he bought the club in 2020, then he will be able to demonstrate that plan as well to the Premier League. So, I think this is going to take still a few months before it comes to completion, but it should not drag on in the same way that the 777 debacle did.
Okie dokie. Well, we'll see what develops over time. Potentially, that's good news, however, for Everton. What we do know, in terms of good news, is the news this week that Seamus Coleman has agreed to sign a 1-year extension to his contract to remain at Everton for a 16th season. There was some speculation that maybe Seamus Coleman would depart the club this summer, but great news for Evertonians.
Very much. I don't think we'll see the likes of Seamus Coleman again in terms of a player who spends virtually his entire career with one club in the Premier League. There's so much pressure now for players to move around, and Seamus has been incredibly loyal. I think it's fantastic news that he's going to be with us for our last season at Goodison, and hopefully beyond that in terms of some involvement with the club in a coaching capacity. But that's a story for another day. And wouldn't it just be great if he could lead us to some kind of glory or even Dreamland silverware at some stage in the next 12 months? I also hope, though, that he will not be overused and we won't be over-reliant on Seamus. His main value, surely now at this stage of the career, is in the dressing room. It's in his club captain's role and being called on when necessary. But we need resources. We need 1 or 2 right backs. Maybe Nathan Patterson will be the man who comes through this season. And if Sean Dyche feels he still needs reinforcements, then we need to go out and use some of our limited funds to find a good attacking right back. So Seamus will come on the field, I hope, many times during the year, but perhaps in more of a substitute role than a starting berth.
And we will see, but it is likely as well, of course, Steve, that Jarrad Branthwaite is unlikely to be part of Everton's setup next season. Everton still saying they want the 80 million. And Manchester United, 35 million, whether they're sort of taking advantage of Everton's situation at the minute. Clearly he's worth a lot more than 35 million. But the speculation about Branthwaite will continue.
Yeah, it will. I mean, I heard a rumour yesterday that Everton have had talks with Manu's agent about agreeing personal terms and are planning to offer Man United a bag of Cheerios and a pack of fags for it.
Well, that's a fair comment, isn't it? Yeah, I hadn't heard of that one.
No, seriously, I mean, we are going to need to sell players this summer. I really hope Branthwaite is not the one. He's probably the easiest to sell. There's a market out there for him. But he's a class act, and as we all know, who watched him last season. So I really hope that he stays with us, particularly in light of the ownership. If he's with us this coming season, then it'll look very different in the future for Jarrad Branthwaite, and much more positive for him at Everton. So fingers crossed that he doesn't get sacrificed in the short term.